So the threat of crushing 25% tariffs of all Canadian exports to the U.S. wound up getting put on this 30-day pause. Not a stop, but a pause. So what do Canadians do about their Buy Canadian efforts? Do they put that on pause too? We asked former MP Stephen Fear, and he said, nope, stick with it.
Well, I think they were going to buy Canadian, and I think we still need to buy Canadian. I mean, those tariffs aren't gone, they're on pause. And I wouldn't be doing a victory lap quite yet. I think that, this next month is a time for us to demonstrate what we can do together when we want to. So it's still, buy Canadian, travel Canadian, and support each other. And when the tariffs are no longer a threat to us, then maybe we would consider going back to what we were doing before.
Here in BC, our premier took the Jack Daniels off the shelves. Now it's back on. Are you telling consumers they should still walk past that and try some Crown Royal?
Everybody's going to make their own decision. I would say what's in our best interest right now, it's just my opinion, is those tariffs aren't gone. We shouldn't do a victory lap until those tariffs are expressly gone. We hold the line. And actually, it'll give us 30 days to demonstrate to everybody what actually happens, like what's the end result of us deciding to do this.
Right. And for people involved in business, they were looking at those tariffs and also looking at the results of whatever tariffs would go in the other direction, kind of trying to reshape their image of their business for less purchases and less sales into the U.S. Should they still be making those sorts of contingency plans?
Again, I would not change anything until we get a signal back from the U.S. that these tariffs are no longer a threat to us, because right now they are. They're temporarily suspended for 30 days. Don't forget, something similar happened in 2018 at the G7 meeting in Quebec. Leaving the meeting, all the G7 countries agreed to a communique that was going to be broadcast. Trump got on Air Force One. Trudeau was out, closing the meeting down and speaking to, all the people that were watching. And Trudeau made a comment about steel and aluminum tariffs that were still on the table. And he said something to the effect of, hey, we're not going to get bullied on this issue. And Trump was on Air Force One looking at his phone and didn't like the way that was communicated. And he pulled out of the statement. So this is not over. I'm glad, as many are, that this isn't happening yesterday. But I think we hold the line until we are no longer threatened by this.
Right. So the other issue that this kind of brought up were these annoying interprovincial trade barriers that we continue to have. It gets brought up from time to time and never really resolved. It's almost as though if this threat had stayed in place longer, we would have made more ground on this.
Yeah, that's true, and I agree. And we should have dealt with this when we negotiated U.S. or NAFTA into USMCA. There was a period of uncertainty when we were talking about the same thing, 5-6 years ago. It's a difficult conversation because everyone has to agree, and that's never easy. The easiest time to do it is when we're all concerned about something. So my opinion on this is, whether or not this gets resolved with the U.S. tomorrow, the next day, or at the end of the month, we need to tear down those interprovincial trade barriers. I would think that most premiers are probably most interested in talking about it right now, and that would help us immensely, because this isn't going away. Every single time we have to negotiate with the U.S. on any kind of fiscal treaty or agreement, we don't want to be in this position. So
do you think there's enough momentum on the interprovincial trade to actually make something happen?
I do. I think there is. I think that would be facilitated by the federal government, but the provinces have to agree. And if there was ever a time they were going to agree, I think it's probably now.
I think I've heard experts say that the interference of business that those barriers put in place just about equals what we were looking at with 20.
It's not good, and it seems unnecessary. There's going to be winners and losers, unfortunately, in almost any agreement. But if it's a good agreement, you can mitigate that, and if people want to work together, and there's a reason to work together right now. So I would say now's the time to strike at that particular issue. I think that we also need to get, if this isn't already happening, we need to seriously get the other G6 partners on the phone and start coming up with, we're not going to take this lying down collectively.
Right. It sounds like that has been happening, right?
Well, I don't know. It may. I'm not looking at the news 24/7, but I mean, today it's Canada, Mexico, and China. Next month it could be France and Britain and Germany. Who knows who's going to be? But the only way we're going to deal with this problem kind of definitively is if we all stand up together and just say we're not going to tolerate that.
Right.
And that means there's going to need to be a will. And let's not forget, Canada's come to the party pretty big time over the last decade or decades, right? Go back to the mid of the last century for Europe. And I think it's not unreasonable for us to expect them to do the same for us.
You know, it's not that comforting. I think what you're saying is stay worried.
Yeah, well, it's not over. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be a rough ride for the next couple of years, certainly until the midterms in the U.S. We'll see what happens. But a 30-day reprieve is obviously better than nothing, but this is not over. And until, on this one particular issue, until the next one comes along, my advice would be hold the line, buy Canadians, support Canadians.
How do you feel when you hear this? Canada should be the 51st state. What?
Yeah, no, nobody wants that, and I think that's more just provocative talk from Trump trying to get everybody excited. I don't think it's helpful, and I don't think it's going to happen. But it's unwanted, and I can't think of one person that I know or I can think of agreeing with that.
Okay, back to the first question again, just to underline it. If people were changing their habits or their plans to be more supportive of Canadian business and Canadian purchases, stick with that.
Stick with that, because what's going to happen is in 30 days' time, if not before that, he's going to reevaluate that. And in the interim, I mean, the only thing that's going to change his mind on this is if there's more pressure on him not to do it than to go through with it. And if we stop buying American products in the interim, he's going to have a bunch of American CEOs and companies going to the White House to say, do not try and do this to Canada because we're going to feel the pain. So we got to demonstrate that.
Terrific. Thanks for this.
Thanks.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.